Hey guys, Cameron Shook with First Gen Tundra here. This is the second video in the series that I'm doing on electrical upgrades to your truck. Again, this is the second video, and this one is going to be a bare bones discussion of the three common electrical devices that you'll see in different portions of your truck. A fuse, a switch, and a relay. It's really important that you understand the types of fuses and switches and relays, how they work, and how you can best use them in the different upgrades that you're going to be doing. Fuses are going to be one of the most common types that you'll see, and they are obviously one of the things you need more than anything else because they actually keep your truck functioning safely. Fuses, once they reach a certain amperage, a certain breaking point, they will open the circuit, stopping the flow of electricity, preventing things hopefully from catching on fire. That's the idea. There's several different kinds. There's blade fuses, which everybody has probably seen before. There's A&L style fuses, which are more common in audio systems and higher amperage applications. And then there's also resettable fuses, where, for example, once it trips, instead of you having to replace an actual fuse, you can literally just go click, and guess what? You're back in business. And those come in a variety of amperages, all the way from 20 up to 200 amps, I think I've seen. Again, you have to size the amp to the load that it's going to be carrying. So for example, this is a 15 amp blade fuse. If I put this in line to a 20 amp light, the light is never going to work because every time it tries to pull 20 amps, this fuse is going to blow and cut off the circuit, rendering it useless. So for example, you'll want to upsize between 10 and 15% based on the load. There are certain charts that actually list out exactly what fuse you should have for what load. Consult those. They're better experts than I am. But typically, if that same 20 amp light, I was putting it on my truck, I would put maybe a 25 amp fuse. Another thing that's really important too is fuse location in your circuit design. It's one of those things where it's very common to see people just put it wherever the easiest place, to actually mount it to the truck is. But I will say that if you're going to actually do it, try putting it as close to the battery as possible. And the reason I say that is, let's say you have a roof-mounted light bar, and you have maybe 10 feet of wire up to the top with this light. The issue is like, let's say something on the light goes bad, it starts shorting to the cab of your truck, and it actually starts pulling way more amperage than it's supposed to, and this entire line starts getting extremely hot and burning insulation. Now, hopefully, you've got a fuse mounted as close as possible to the battery, because this part will begin pulling the most amps first. This is the part that will get the hottest first, and then it will break the circuit and hopefully save 10 feet of wire. If you don't have that mounted up here, you run a lot more risk of more electrical damage and more burning. It's a smaller risk, it's not a major issue, but for safety's sake, try to put the fuse as close to the battery as possible. So just a general piece of advice in terms of safety. Switches is going to be the next object, and switches are the most common ways to activate devices that you've seen. It's going to be the same thing as a switch is whatever you want it to be. It could be a toggle switch, it could be a push button switch like you have for your HVAC controls. Whatever is the activation method is considered a switch. Electrically, it's usually shown by this diagram. One thing that's really important is that if you're running low amperage draws, if you're doing like a half amp load, for example, a switch is fine to have it run directly from the battery through a switch to the device, no problems. It's not really high heat, you don't have to worry about the gauge of the wire, it's pretty simple. The problem comes into if you start running higher amperage loads, 10, 20, 30, 50 amps, the switch actually has to be rated for those loads, and you start getting bigger and beefier switches, and then you also have to have bigger and beefier wires running to the switch and then all the way to your device. And if you're wanting to turn on these devices from the cab of your truck, that can mean a lot of long runs of really heavy gauge wire, which starts to become an issue trying to pull it in and out of the firewall. So that's where relays come in, and a relay is just a different kind of switch. This is the electrical symbol for some kinds of relays, and there's different styles of both switches and relays. These are single pull, single throws, meaning that they only have an on and an off. There are some switch types where, for example, you will see that it actually either turns on one thing or another thing, or there's a third state where it goes completely off. Those are more complicated switches. They're more specialized. For the most part, people are probably just going to be doing single pull, single throw switches. But if you do have a certain lighting requirement that you want to be able to use one device, one relay, for example, to switch between two, you can find different options to settle that up. But back to relays, though, the big thing with relays is that it is just a normal switch, but instead of a physical toggle, instead of it being something you physically push, it's actually electrically switched, meaning that, as dumb as it sounds, you'll actually have another switch activate a relay. The reason you do this is you'd actually take this exact switch here and you would run it to here, and the idea is you can run from your battery, positive leg here, through this relay, and let's say you had a ARB compressor. Now that is going to pull in the single stage high capacity. I think it pulls around 29 amps at full draw. If you were going to run 29 amps through a switch, you would need a very big switch, big beefy wires, and you'd have a really long run, especially if you're mounting it under the bumper of your truck. So what the benefit of a relay does is that you can run really skinny wires to the switch to actually, I mean, you could run 22 gauge, 18 gauge wire, I mean, nothing. I mean, super easy to get through the firewall to activate this electrical relay. And when the magnetic portion of the relay activates, it magnetically pulls that gate closed and closes the circuit from the battery directly to the device. So the big benefit is that you can do the shortest run possible from the battery to the compressor without having to route it through the cab for you to push a button. It gets the full power draw from the battery. It's separated so that you're not running big heavy wires inside of your cab, and you're still getting the full power of the battery. Those are the three basic devices. If you have any questions, put them down in the comments. I'm sure that there will be some people asking some interesting things about single pull, double throws, or maybe a better explanation of relays. Again, this is the second video I've done. I'm welcome to criticism. Let me know what I can do better to explain it. Thanks so much, and see you guys in the next video.